Robert Kraft will not be enshrined in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Now, Jory, our great Jory Epstein, Epstein, the great reporter for us, has talked a lot about how the Kraft family cares immensely about this. Yeah. Kraft has put a lot behind the momentum of wanting to get this induction. So this has to be a heartbreaking moment. And this continues a conversation where if you're a Patriots fan, you're looking around and saying, what in the hell are voters thinking?
Well, Robert Kraft belongs in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I also don't think that it's right, it feels right, that Robert Kraft would be voted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame before Bill Belichick. Look, Robert Kraft will be. I think he should be a Hall of Famer. Whenever you're an owner that's won 6 Super Bowls, has overseen one of the greatest dynasties that we've ever seen in this sport, then yes, you can't tell the story or the history of the National Football League without talking about those Patriots teams, without Robert Kraft's ownership of those Patriots teams. So I think he belongs in the Hall of Fame. I also don't think it would be right if he was in it before Bill Belichick. But we can talk all day long about how Bill Belichick belongs in the Hall of Fame. Obviously, he does. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer. He has one of the best resumes of any other coach that's ever coached this sport. Robert Kraft belongs in the Hall of Fame. Sure, we can debate that all day long if you disagree with me, and if you do, that's fine. But I think this just goes back to me, Fitzy. This is an issue with the entire process. Yeah. This is an issue with the entire process of Hall of Fame voting. The fact that you only have a finite number of contributors that can be eligible for Hall of Fame voting every year. So we're talking about general managers, we're talking about media people, we're talking about owners. Well, can it just be, hey, this guy belongs in the Hall of Fame and he's eligible to be in the Hall of Fame, instead of pitting potential Hall of Famers against one another? Like, why is the process for players so much different than it is for coaches and for owners and for general managers? It doesn't make any sense. You're not accurately telling the story and the history of professional football if it's this guy versus this guy instead of just who deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. The process is so convoluted, and I feel like this year, more than any other year in history, is exposing how flawed the process is.
Yeah, I feel like at some point I have comfort knowing Kraft didn't get in because Bill didn't get in. And to me, yes, Belichick is clearly a Hall of Famer. I'm going to say loud and proud, I don't care if any owner ever is kept out of the NFL Hall of Fame. Like, the greatness of your organization are the people that put everything on the line to do it. Because you were a billionaire that happened to get an NFL team and then you wrote checks to the right people, that doesn't, frankly, I could see the argument for contributors on guys like Jerry Jones that changed the league and the way they monetize it and they changed the TV deals. I guess they need to have that. If I was the NFL Hall of Fame, you have so few owners over the course of your history, just have an owner's wing where you celebrate every owner that's ever been lucky enough to be the select billionaire that gets to own a franchise. I see that. I feel like there's some level of one of the weirdest things to me in the NFL is that the minute a team wins, the first thing they do is hands the owner the trophy. It's like, you know what? The owner didn't come up with the game plan. The owner didn't go out on the field. The owner just wrote the checks. Mm-hmm. So I will never have a hard time with Robert Kraft not getting in the Hall of Fame when Belichick didn't get in the Hall of Fame. Like, it's amazing that he wrote the checks to Belichick. It's amazing that he was obviously in the office to put that together. But I have a hard time finding Hall of Fame out of that if I didn't find Hall of Fame out of Belichick. But you're right. The process shouldn't be this complicated. No. If we have a very clear person not in the Hall of Fame, which goes back to Belichick, that should be, and everybody says, well, you don't really understand the process. I don't want to understand the process at that point.
The process doesn't make sense.
I now understand that the process is broken. So the NFL needs to look at this because Roger Goodell yesterday kind of skated around it and said, these gentlemen, I'm sure will get into the Hall of Fame at some point. I just hate that answer. Like, you're either a Hall of Famer or you're not. Who you're up against this year shouldn't be the reason you did or didn't get into it. Like, having having some conversation about Robert Kraft versus Bill Belichick versus Kenny Anderson, the Bengals quarterback. Like, I don't even understand how you look at the three of those three same people through the same lens. But that's what they asked voters to do. It's just failed.
Well, and there are so many players in the Hall of Fame that I'm sure have made any and all of us raise our eyebrow a little bit. Like, really? Does this guy belong in the Hall of Fame? Does this guy deserve to be enshrined in the highest honor of the sport? Good for them for being in it, but like, yeah, does he really belong? But Bill Belichick it's not even a question. Robert Kraft, if we're going to have any owners in the Hall of Fame, and I do hear your argument on not having owners in the Hall of Fame, but if you're going to have any owners in the Hall of Fame, Robert Kraft belongs in the Hall of Fame. So clearly the process is flawed when you have a hands down, no question, no doubt about it candidate that isn't in over players that are like, yeah, they were good. They were really good, but are they Hall of Famers? There's just so much wrong with the process, and it opens itself up to so much subjectivity.
Yeah, it's also wild to me when we look at all of this because Belichick is already talked about constantly with the lens of, well, he didn't win without Brady. That's a thing we hear about Belichick.
Will Brady be a first ballot Hall of Famer?
In my mind, he should be.
1,000%
But if we're sitting here...
I thought Bill should be too.
Exactly. Like, if we're taking it against Bill, what are we going to do with Brady? And then, but beyond that, like, Robert Kraft is also the same person that just hired Gerard Mayo. And he made it 1 year. Now, I think sometimes having the you-know-what to the guts to turn around and say, I made a hiring mistake, and then turn around to Vrabel has turned out to be a very smart move for Robert Kraft. I give him credit for that. But the same owner that we're saying, yeah, but he discovered Bill. Well, it's not that Robert Kraft went out and discovered Brady. Like, he just wrote the checks. So I have a hard time feeling some sort of sympathy for Robert Kraft. It still comes back to that gut, visceral reaction we're all having a week later. The fact that Bill Belichick is not in the Hall of Fame flat out lessens this entire Hall of Fame class. I feel bad for whoever's going to be inducted because the conversation will be, where was Belichick? The conversation will be compared to Belichick in every way. I feel bad for that, but most importantly, Roger Goodell, you need to look at the Hall of Fame voting process, figure out how to fix it, figure out how to simplify it, and figure out how to make sure Hall of Famers get into the Hall of Fame.